Okay, so there's a lot I could say about this. My stomach is probably going to be making a lot of noise, but this is something that I realized way before I ran away. How, like, the whole idea of talking ghetto or even talking quote unquote black, or at least in an American sense, is kind of bullcrap. And the more I did research, and especially the more I traveled, I've realized more and more how, like, this concept is definitely bullcrap. Like, I've even seen quote unquote white people call other quote unquote white people uneducated, poor, impoverished, and trash, white trash, and stuff like that for having southern accents. And typically, the ones that do that are going to be like white people from the West Coast or maybe somewhere up north and stuff like that, that feel that they talk better, even though the southern accent is actually closer to like original English and like British and stuff like that. Like, one of the things I notice is the whole not pronouncing A's, especially when it's like, or no, not pronouncing ER really. That's what I more so meant to say, I think. When it's like at the end of words, or like kind of like skipping over the ing. Like, one of the things about Southern people is that supposedly, as people say, we sing our words, and especially the more of an accent you have, the more you sing your words. It even makes me think about the whole young Sheldon thing and how it's talked about, even in the UK, that often, like, quote-unquote autistic people will have less of an accent, even compared to, like, the people around them or even their own family. Like, if they have a British accent or, like, or a Southern accent, and that's what the accent the people around them have, the quote-unquote autistic person will have less of an accent than everyone else. And they'll often be labeled off as talking proper, or maybe quote-unquote talking white for not having a Southern accent. And stuff like that. Like, I realized really young though, people think it's talking ghetto is literally just having a Southern accent. Like, aside from the codes and even the slang and stuff like that. But anywho, there's this that I said, and this is something that even like higher level Caucasians or the real white supremacists at the top have been talking about a lot in the past couple years. Which I guess I should just read the comment. So this was about Willie Lynch Syndrome House Nigger Programmer, pretty much, as I call it. That's what the video was about. The same way everyone's talking these days, even in Europe, places like the UK, this is the Southern accent, closest dialect to original English and British accent, as well as Scottish and Irish, or more so Irish. These days, AAV and BBE is being labeled off as Gen Z and Gen Alpha slang. All the suburbs kids are talking like this and have been. People need to get out more and do real research on language and history. Linguistics will tell you this way of speaking is British and Irish. And of course, I already know a lot of people from Europe or like Britain and stuff like that. They'll be mad about that. But a lot of the pronunciations really do go back to like British and stuff like that. In fact, I even had somebody tell me that, like, because I was talking about how like Africans and how like they pronounce words when they're speaking English, and even Jamaicans and stuff like that, but especially Africans, and they were saying that it's because they got colonized by Britain and stuff like that, but it doesn't even have anything to do with that. It's literally just like how majority of places pronounce their words and stuff versus like with newer languages like English, and especially American English, or the American English that is considered proper. And crap, what was I about to say? Hold up. Even with the whole new J sound thing that white Christian nationalists like to come argue with me about, even though I don't really mention it that often, but how like even in European languages like Spanish, they like pronounce the J with the H sound, and then like in the past it was kind of like a Y sound, but in American English and even English in general, like there's with Jesus, for example, the one thing that people hate when people talk about, there was no J sound, and the J sound is very, very new. It's just as new as the term Middle East, just about. But not gonna go into that, because then I'll be way somewhere else. But anywho, am I recording? Oh, okay. So, oh yeah, like it makes me think about this ad that I wonder if it has something to do with like Russia and China sleeper cells. Which, of course, America's judgment is going to come anyway, so I don't care if it does, but it was really interesting. But there was this ad that I used to see a lot, like a while back, where this dude was pretty much like talking about teaching Chinese people how to speak English like an American. And he was saying, the issue is that you're pronouncing American words or English words with Chinese sounds. And that's what like Jamaican and African and British and stuff like that. That's what that makes me think about, because it's like it's just a certain way that most people would pronounce stuff. Like as I may have mentioned, I met some like French people and I noticed the same thing with them. Like I'm trying to remember what word it was. Like they pronounce like a lot of things with like French sounds, I guess I could say, and it is even similar to like how Southern accents can be, and even like Irish and African, like how an African would like pronounce American words, or like I guess I don't know African sounds. It kind of sounds weird, but hopefully people will get what I'm saying here. It's actually really interesting how like, well, actually no, this is just one of the things with like white supremacy in general. Labeling off ancient standards as wrong or third world or things like that, and replacing it with new standards and new principles, and acting as if the new principles are the only principles and they're the right principles and everybody else is wrong. And so anyhow, hold up, I need to blow my nose. In fact, no, it even makes me think about how I always mention the white supremacist philosophy of atheism, and how, like, now anybody who believes in spiritual stuff is considered third world or a conspiracy theorist and schizophrenic, because it goes against the newer European philosophies that were actually made by Freemason Luciferians, by the way, but the supposed atheist philosophies that are made by Europeans, and now everybody has to bow down to those standards of logic and their idea of what reality is and what does and doesn't exist, or they're a schizophrenic conspiracy theorist or a mentally ill poor person who wants a sky daddy and all those different terms that they like to say. Or like if you don't believe in their version of medicine, which is just hiding symptoms, then you're a schizophrenic cult leader, a black cult leader, and you like Dr. Sebi and Yaki Awaken type people, and you're in a third world stupid cult, stuff like that. And even with like the European Gentile biblical hijackings of Christianity and pagan Roman Catholicism, and their Knights Templar, Freemason, and different Shriner off branches, and the revised version of quote-unquote Jesus Christ, like things that they just recently made up within the past decades or so, or past couple hundred years. Anybody who doesn't believe in these newer standards is supposedly wrong, or quote-unquote mentally ill, or uneducated, and they talk funny because they don't talk how certain groups of Caucasian people want them to, or they don't believe what certain groups of Caucasian people want them to believe. And so anywho, as a British person, don't try and gaslight people into thinking that we have any ownership over AAVE, which a lot of AAVE is just a southern accent. Like, if you take out some of the slang stuff, a lot of it's just really southern stuff. Like, kind of like how higher level white supremacists say that this is kind of flipped around, but there is truth to it. They say that really black people, since most of the black population lives in the South anyways, they just act like poor white people. All they talk about is GUNs and their Bible, and that's considered southern white trash stuff. Which in my, I don't even remember what the video is called, but I go over the whole thing with like the white trash, and I've been saying for years that the real war is against the real white supremacists at the top versus the ones at the bottom. So like the serpent seed European J through W's with all the money versus like the lower level Caucasians that are mad at them because they were supposed to like colonize together because they're all the same people, and they were supposed to take over things together, but then only 1% actually got something out of all the sacrificial rituals, and only 1% owns everything. And yeah, so it even goes back to the thing I mentioned in my last video that I just uploaded with like the homeless white people and how they'll be like, I never want to hear anything like white privilege because look at my life, there's no such thing as white privilege. And even the white homeless lady that wake everybody up at 3 a.m. screaming, I don't deserve to be treated like this because I'm not a nigger, stuff like that. Anyhow, where was I? We have never said we be, they be, she tried, etc. in the UK before now with this current generation. And that's the Irish part, which I'm going to go into that more in like a couple minutes. Like, not pronouncing certain things, that's the British part. Like, they're going to automatically pronounce the N-word with kind of like an A type sound and like less of the ER just because of like how they pronounce things. And then I already mentioned the ING thing. I can't really think of any good examples right now, but that's why I said British and Irish, because the we be doing, they be, all that, that's the more Irish part, which higher level white supremacists have actually made videos talking about this and how they noticed that Southern people and quote-unquote black Americans talk like Irish people. In fact, in the video where the dude talks about this, I would have to find it. He was even mentioning the whole, we be doing this, they be doing that thing. Okay, so I'm trying to find, where was I? It's appropriation and attempted erasure at its finest. And you know, though, it kind of does, like, make me think about the white liberal type thing. Now, of course, I don't know what this person looks like, but they did say that they're British, and it does sound like they do feel, like, upset about me mentioning this as, like, having, like, some British, dialect to it, and they seem to not like that. But that's the reality. There's also a lot of, like, adaptations to stuff. Because if I'm remembering right, I know like one of the things with black code, quote unquote, is being able to talk in a way where like we could talk to each other without like white people figuring out what we're talking about. And it had a lot of stuff to do with like, in fact, even this law that I remember people talking about where like, due to white people being scared, it was illegal for like multiple quote-unquote black people to get together and like talk to each other outside and on street corners and stuff like that because they were scared of them planning some stuff like that. So I know like the black code thing has like some stuff to do with laws like that, but I'd have to do research on it again because I don't really remember that much about it. But anywho, name it what it is, Black American vernacular. Labeling it Gen Z slang as colonizer behavior. Which I will say, though, there's definitely, like, some wishy-washiness with that, because it's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of, like, white savior type stuff, like, seeming as if you care about the, what's it called, the colonizer behavior, but very obviously mad about anyone actually mentioning where a lot of this dialect comes from. But anywho, plain and simple, it's gentrifying their cultural expressions that come naturally to them. Because that they have literally been speaking since slavery in the South. And I'll even like talk about a little bit the whole thing with like the idea that everybody's a slave trade descendant. That's not true either. One of the things with the black label is that as many people that are labeled off as black these days weren't labeled off as black until like a few decades ago. And I'm not like into the colored term or any of that stuff either, but it's like people were labeled off as black in America to confuse people. And there's even a lot of people claiming the black label that it was never made for. Like, for example, Africans and Indians and stuff like that, at least at one point before, like, the beast system, NAZIS stuff started, like, rolling out even more in America. It's getting worse and worse with that. But before all the stuff that's going on now, all those people used to be able to come to America and get labeled off as white on the U.S. Census. Like, all the different people that are labeling themselves off as black now is, like, very new. Like, a lot of people are even talking about how Somalis are saying that they aren't black, and even Africans are talking about that. But Africans, the black label really wasn't made for them. It was made for a certain group of people in America. Although there are Negroids, Caucasoids, and Mongoloids, and Somalis would be Negroid unless they want to run under Mongoloid like Indians and some Arabs do. But other than that, they would still be Negroid, but they realistically aren't quote-unquote black, at least not with what the label was originally made for and who it was made for. Even a lot of people that are labeled off as black in America now would have been labeled off at one point as freed colored people or free colored people, because there were the now called Black American Aboriginals. But when people think about like Native Americans, which is why I'd rather use the American Aboriginal term instead of Native American, they think of Mongoloid type people who are also natives, but they're not the American Aboriginals. And there's even a lot of wars that have been like caused, especially online with like the pretendian stuff, and a lot of people are mad about that. Especially like some of the Mongoloid natives that are coming out the woodworks. I think of these two dudes specifically. I don't remember their channel name, but they like have long hair. And they're definitely one of the types of natives, but they've been made due to white supremacy and colonization to argue with the quote-unquote Black American Aboriginals about who the real natives are. Which is very stupid because it's like, okay, there's also the Hawaiians, there's the Alaskan natives, which are also Mongoloid, and actually Alaska is Russia. So that just goes hand in hand with the whole thing with the continents and like Asia and all that stuff. But anywho, to get back to the point before I like make this more confusing, there's a lot of like arguments going on because the black label has been thrown on so many people. Because there were the true Yasharael slave trade descendants. There's also the American Aboriginals, who also some of them were true Yasharael as well. But there was different types, like there were Kushite, quote-unquote Black American Aboriginals, and stuff like that. So, yeah. Anyways, I can't remember what else I was going to say with that. But I don't really remember. So, did I already read all this? Naturally to them, maybe even before for some earlier groups, taking people's stuff then acting like you originated it is some sick behavior. And I'm not gonna lie though, this is wishy-washy. I don't like the idea of labeling this stuff off as Gen Z slang and Gen Alpha slang either. Like, I remember seeing a video of the lady that's known as the Indian lady that's always roasting Americans. And so I saw a video of that lady, and she was talking about, like, terms like Delulu and how they're supposedly stupid, and how it's Gen Z stupid slang and stuff like that. But Delulu is not, it just means delusional. I don't really get how it's supposed to be stupid. But, like, I don't really know what to say about it. Then labeling it off as Gen Z slang, it's definitely problematic. But still, the dialect is what it is, so. Here's something I said. They be doing this and we be doing that is in fact Irish. This is something higher level white supremacists and higher level Caucasians and the 1% mention often. What I always forget is that when I use these types of terms, most people don't know what I'm talking about. Like, a lot of people even get offended at even mentioning the reality of the 1% higher level Caucasians and the lower level ones. That would offend a lot of people. I do often forget that people don't know what the heck I'm talking about, typically. Most people don't. But, anywho, hold up. Hence why let's screw this up, hate the southern accent and see it as uneducated and white trash English. Even though southern English is an older dialect, not pronouncing A's and INGs, which are more so meant the ER. Sometimes it's British. Southern English isn't even racial, it's southern. And it does go back to Irish, British, etc. Like Appalachian Old English goes back to Northern Ireland. And LOL, gaslight. People need to leave these me laughing at my own jokes. Oh my gosh. People need to leave these psychiatric terms alone. LOL, everybody's a gaslight narcissist now. Which, to be honest, is a projection of a racial Jezebel. Much of AAVE is just a southern accent. There's also code and the usual grammatical error of those who are foreign. Or I meant to say black code more so. I've been around some French people lately who are from France and see the same things. As in, like, I see a lot of the same, like, grammatical type errors that people like to label off as uneducated. And even just like with how they pronounce certain things, which I already talked about. In fact, much of AAVE is French, like the term bougie, which that's probably not spelled right. But I know, like, in French it would actually be pronounced as, like, bourgeois or something. Or however it's spelled, is actually a French word, but pronounced differently. These dialects is also why Irish, British, and Southern music is like the most. Or specifically British and Southern music, which actually, I've seen UK drill music where the accent almost sounded like Irish or Scottish or something. I've even seen, like, African people that seem to have, like, Irish and Scottish type accents. And even, like, going back to how certain people, like, pronounce stuff and just, like, how languages are. Like, I noticed that Russian, like, French sounds similar enough to Russian. Russian sounds similar enough to, like, a lot of Northeast African are now called Middle Eastern languages. German even sounds almost similar. And, like, even some of the Russian, like, letters are kind of similar to, like, some Northeast African letters. Which even makes sense how people are able to, like, or how the J3Ws are able to pull off their little European flip with, like, the Yiddish mixed with Hebrew. Stuff like that. Because it's all similar enough. Where was I last at? I think I already read all that. And I personally don't like the idea of Gen Z slang, quote unquote, either.